The narrative unfolds as God, in an effort to alleviate his boredom, creates a new world named Abyss. He infuses this world with struggle and war, deeming them essential for survival. In Abyss, one must fight, kill, and struggle to earn God's favor. God finds immense entertainment in this brutal spectacle. The scene then transitions to a battlefield littered with the bodies of dragons and humans. A man, spewing blood, attempts to rise, but a formidable dragon looms behind him, pinning him down with its leg. Despite his imminent demise, the man laughs, mocking the dragons, believing them to be doomed. As the dragon gathers its power to deliver the final blow, the man reflects on his allies, pondering that had it been them, or had it been him in different circumstances, success might have been within reach. The narrative shifts to a scene where Ares, the monarch of the Valkyrie and a member of the final Death Squad, holds a sign indicating the demise of the last Death Squad. She, along with Keldian, Kangtae, and the protagonist Kang Hansu, are humanity's last survivors. Kang Hansu, as one of the final Death Squad members, is a pivotal figure in this dire scenario. Their attention turns to the Archenial's time-space crystal, an orb imbued with the power to travel back in time. This crystal represents humanity's last hope, following its annihilation 50 years after entering the Abyss. Kangtae posits that only one person can use the crystal to return to the past, subtly suggesting himself as the strongest candidate. His implication is met with Keldian's provocation, expressing disappointment in Kangtae's lack of reason. Ares intervenes, urging moderation in their discussion. She informs them that with most Valkyries defeated in the battle against the Golden Dragon, it's only a matter of time before the dragon reaches them. Acknowledging the grim reality, she asserts that their only viable option is for Kang Hansu to use the crystal to travel to the past, as he is the only one among them capable of such a feat. Kang Hansu, reflecting on his prolonged battle through the years, wonders if accepting his fate in this moment is acceptable. Ares, holding his hand, rebukes his weakness, reminding him that he carries humanity's hope. However, Hansu's eyes betray a lack of hope. Both Kang and Keldian encourage Hansu with smiles. Keldian reinforces Ares' point, highlighting Hansu's exceptional progress despite starting 20 years later than them. Kangtae acknowledges Hansu's skills, yet he gives Hansu the freedom to refuse the mission. Kangtae inadvertently reveals his interest in retrieving items from the past, hastily correcting himself to emphasize that Hansu is the one who should undertake this task. Hansu, slightly smiling, stands and approaches Archenial's time-space crystal. He is startled to see dragons already above them. As a dragon breaks through the ceiling, energizing its power, Keldian instructs everyone not to be distracted and casts a shielding spell to block the dragon's electric bolt. Keldian then strategizes with Ares and Kangtae, asking them to hold off the attack while he prepares another spell. Kangtae confidently accepts the challenge, eager to demonstrate his abilities. Ares takes the lead, rushing towards the dragons and striking her weapon on the ground to unleash her lightning bolt power. She creates an opening for Kangtae, signaling him to seize the opportunity in their desperate battle against the dragons. In the midst of the fierce battle, Kangtae unleashes his flaming power. Without needing Ares' instruction, he knows his role, using his sword to swiftly take down two dragons. However, the Golden Dragon launches an attack, and Kangtae struggles to block it, finding himself in a precarious situation. Hansu is tempted to assist, but Keldian urges him to focus on his mission, emphasizing the need to detach from the current battle. Ares, from a distance, echoes Keldian's sentiment, imploring Hansu to leave the fight to them and proceed with his task. She advises Hansu to be more considerate of those who approach him in the future, requesting him to heed her advice this one time. Hansu, with a smile, agrees to try. Ares, acknowledging his consistent demeanor even in such dire circumstances, entrusts the rest of the fight to Keldian. Keldian, addressing Hansu, emphasizes the importance of discernment and saving lives during his mission. He specifically instructs Hansu to eliminate Clementine, the Berserk monarch, and reiterates the need to save those who truly deserve it. After ensuring Hansu understands, Keldian proceeds to activate Erkeniel's time-space crystal. As the crystal begins to spin and rise, emitting bright light and powerful energy, Kang Tae and Ares turn their attention to it, with Kang Tae showing a hint of a smile. Keldian, with hands clasped in prayer, intensifies the spell, drawing a massive ray from the sky to complete the ritual. The crystal shines brilliantly, sending out thunderbolts. Suddenly, Hansu hears panicked voices and feels a change in the atmosphere. He notices a green light ray in the distance. With the crystal functioning and the portal to the past activated, Hansu resolves not to fail in his renewed life. In the newly reincarnated realm, confusion reigned supreme. The people were disoriented, having no knowledge of their surroundings. Chaos erupted as one woman frantically searched for her children amidst the turmoil. Hansu reflected, understanding their distress. They had been suddenly thrust into an otherworld, a situation bound to create panic. He remembered the year of his birth as being extraordinary. Initially, there were 100 people, but soon the numbers grew rapidly. Disappearances became so frequent, they spiraled beyond control. By the time Hansu reached the age of 20, he too vanished, claimed by the enigmatic force known as the Otherworld. This entity consumed other dimensions, standing at the epicenter of the abyss's influence. Those who arrived in this otherworld earliest gained skills more quickly, their actions marked by excessive zeal. However, the presence of bizarre and terrifying monsters rendered this place a nightmare. It was a world ruled by violence and anarchy. Individuals consumed by the abyss found themselves transported to the otherworld. Hansu understood that as more people from their world arrived, the portal to the abyss would unveil itself, heralding the onset of a monumental war. Hansu faced a daunting challenge with only 5 years to regain his strength. All his previously acquired skills and power had vanished. At that moment, he sensed it was time for something to emerge. Abruptly, the sky seemed to collapse, and from it emerged an unfamiliar creature adorned with wings, a tail, and horns. The sight of this being left everyone in shock. As all eyes turned to the creature, it felt a sense of malevolence emanating from it. Clearing its throat, the creature attempted to introduce itself, saying, "Hello, I'm the assistant fairy who's here to help with the quick proceedings." The fairy urged the crowd to pay attention to its forthcoming words. Hansu, however, was skeptical. He was familiar with these deceitful beings. Their so-called quick proceedings typically involved inciting violence and conflict among people. The assistant fairy then welcomed everyone to the otherworld, and promised a surprising opportunity for all. However, his speech was abruptly interrupted by a man's shout. The man, clearly agitated, demanded, "Wait! Otherworld? What was that? Stop the nonsense and send me home." The fairy, visibly annoyed by the interruption, insisted on continuing the explanation. The man quickly noticed a shift in the fairy's tone, realizing the situation was becoming more tense. The fairy resumed its explanation, adopting a more sinister tone. It declared that infinite freedom was bestowed upon everyone in this realm. This world was devoid of law, order, morals, or ethics, a place beyond anyone's wildest dreams, free from all rules. But it wasn't just about the absence of societal constraints. The physical limitations that once burdened everyone would vanish too. Actions here could lead to endless growth and strength, akin to a hero in a movie. The fairy tantalized them with the prospect of making their wildest imaginations come true. In a demonstration of this newfound freedom and power, the assistant fairy, with a snap of its fingers, targeted the man who had interrupted earlier. The man was caught off guard, suddenly finding his body gruesomely pierced, creating a large hole. Blood splattered onto the faces of the men nearby, leaving them in shock as the man died instantly. The assistant fairy, with a devious demeanor, apologized, expressing its disdain for those who were loud and talkative. This display of power sent everyone into a panic, with many retreating in fear. Without hesitation, the fairy snapped its fingers again, causing another person to explode violently, much like a balloon. This dramatic spectacle silenced the crowd, instilling fear and shock. Enraged, the little devil, the assistant fairy, declared its hatred for loud noises. It sternly reminded the survivors that they needed to work hard to stay alive in this merciless and chaotic world. With a smile, the fairy expressed its pleasure at the newfound silence, ready to continue. It produced a white stone marked with symbols, introducing it as a rune. The fairy explained that everyone could obtain these runes by killing any living being. There were 8 others similar to this one, appearing randomly. This particular rune was colorless, but those who worked hard and grew stronger could obtain more powerful, colored runes. This rune specifically enhanced strength. The fairy then inquired who wanted to take it. Han-Su, the only one to raise his hand, hadn't used such a rune in a long time. The fairy, feigning a handover, playfully withdrew the rune, commenting on Hansu's enthusiasm. It then instructed Han-Su to extend his hand to receive the rune. As he handed over the rune, the fairy remarked on the rune's ability to manipulate laws, informing Han-Su that his muscular strength limit had increased from 117.1 kilograms to 122.3 kilograms. However, Hansu's expression revealed his indifference. He was already familiar with this information. The fairy, noticing Hansu's unimpressed face, paused, realizing this was not the reaction it had expected. Nonetheless, it continued, elaborating that the runes had various effects beyond the scope of conventional science, endowed with abilities that defied explanation. In the midst of the panic, the assistant fairy, maintaining its devilish demeanor, proposed to demonstrate the rune's power once more, asking if anyone else wished to try. However, seeing the general apprehension, the fairy expressed disappointment and decided against further demonstrations. It emphasized that regardless of the rune's specific enhancements, acquiring them would undoubtedly be beneficial. The fairy then advised everyone to collect as many runes as possible to increase their chances of survival. As the fairy showcased another rune, the crowd, driven by desperation to become stronger, jostled forward to claim it. But, in a twist, the fairy withdrew the rune, remarking that after observing Hansu's experience, it seemed an explanation was unnecessary. This action left everyone frustrated. The fairy then revealed a technique. By touching their right ear, individuals could view their rune collection in a system window. This appealed to the human tendency to quantify abilities. As each person checked, they discovered their own stats. Han-Su, for instance, noticed that his strength had increased by 1. He realized that by hunting and gathering more runes, he could further enhance his mana and magic power. The fairy continued, explaining that in this world, runes could be acquired by killing any living being, emphasizing the inherent unfairness, similar to their previous world. To assist in their survival, the fairy distributed knives to each person, announcing the start of a tutorial. Confusion arose among the crowd as they pondered what the fairy meant by tutorial. Suddenly, they were startled by unfamiliar noises from behind. Turning around, they were confronted by a horde of goblins, armed and charging towards them with clear intent to attack. Everyone became frightened after seeing the pack of goblins with killer intent. Among them, a girl told everyone to remain calm, not to aggravate the goblins, and to slowly move backward. Following her advice, the group began to retreat, but Han-Su remained still, observing the situation. As they moved back, a man abruptly stopped, causing another man to bump into him. The second man asked the first what he was doing. The first man replied with concern that something was off and that there seemed to be an invisible shield blocking their retreat. They attempted to break through this barrier, but quickly realized it was futile. That's when they noticed the walls closing in on them. Trapped between an unbreakable barrier and rapidly approaching goblins, they had no choice but to defend themselves and drew their knives. Suddenly, they observed one of their group passing through the wall. They inquired how he managed it, but he was as baffled as they were, simply having found himself able to pass through. Then, a number appeared on the wall, 49. Its meaning was unclear until another person passed through the wall, and the number decreased to 48. It became apparent that only 50 individuals could escape this confined space. This realization sparked chaos and urgency among the group as they scrambled to find a way out. Hansu stood, observing the scene, thinking about how pathetic the situation was. He believed that if all 100 of them united and fought together, they might sustain injuries, but there would be fewer casualties. Recalling his first arrival in this area, where roughly 40 people fell to the goblins, he noted the difference this time. Only 10 had survived among those who couldn't pass through the wall. Setting his goal to clear the area and advance to the next stage, Hansu prepared himself. As the goblins approached close enough to attack, one leaped towards a man who pleaded for help. In that moment, a knife flew out of nowhere, slicing the goblin. Another goblin lunged to attack, but Hansu intervened, standing protectively in front of the man. The goblin, armed with a wooden weapon, attempted to strike Hansu, who effortlessly caught its hand and then sliced its neck with his knife. Hansu, wielding his knife with killer intent, became the center of everyone's attention. They surrounded him, shocked and surprised by his prowess. Feeling slightly uncomfortable, Hansu realized this was his body from 10 years earlier. Nonetheless, he focused on the task at hand, collecting the 2 runes dropped by the goblins he had slain. After claiming the 2 runes, Hansu checked his system window status and noticed an increase in his dexterity by 0.1. He felt fortunate because an increase in dexterity meant more than just enhanced speed. It warped time around the user, improving reaction speed by 0.1 times, allowing him to perform actions much faster. This improvement was immediately tested as a goblin threw a large knife at him from behind. Thanks to his enhanced reflexes, Hansu easily dodged the attack. He then threw his knife, striking the goblin in the forehead and killing it instantly. This display of skill momentarily frightened the other goblins. However, driven by their predatory nature, the goblins soon rushed at Hansu, intent on killing him. As they leaped towards him, Hansu anticipated their reaction, knowing they would become more aggressive at the sight of blood. He switched to an ice pick grip on his knife and, in a swift motion, sliced through 3 goblins in an instant. As each goblin fell, a rune emerged, which Hansu collected. Meanwhile, as others fought among themselves to escape, one man noticed Hansu's solitary battle. This observation prompted a change in the group's mindset. They decided to join forces and fight against the goblins. With renewed determination, the people approached the goblins, leading to a fierce clash between the 2 groups. Hansu continued his relentless assault on the goblins. He understood that normally, there was no need to act with such urgency at the beginning of such encounters, but the circumstances were different this time. He was aware that, including this location, there were many travelers in the world, and the number was incalculable. First-year participants in this realm were protected in the tutorial area for 3 months. However, after this period, they would be thrust into combat with second- and third-year participants. For Hansu, this situation presented a significant opportunity. He continued to engage the goblins, slicing through them and collecting as many runes as possible. In his mind, this was a chance to strengthen himself, even if only slightly. He felt that Keldian had made a wise decision in sending him to this time. The aftermath of the battle was a grim sight, with the ground littered with the bodies of both goblins and humans. The people around Hansu were in disbelief at the sheer number of enemies he had faced alone. Amidst the carnage, one figure stood out starkly: Hansu, solitary among the dead. To everyone around him, he appeared as nothing short of a monstrous warrior, a testament to his formidable strength and combat prowess. The little fairy was so impressed by that. He told Hansu that he had done pretty well over there. He must have worked hard. The number of participants left was decent too. But in everyone's mind, this little fairy was a devil. The little fairy informed them that now they knew how to survive here, he would remove the wall. They just had to keep up their efforts going onward. He had other things to do in other areas, so he wished them good luck. Everyone became very angry, shouting insults at the fairy. Hansu thought that the situation wasn't as bad as before. Looking at his state, he considered that if it was this much, it was good enough for a tutorial. He also found a blade received as a symbol of courtship, which seemed useful. Now a question arose in his mind about how he should proceed from here on. Because he needed to find a way to get stronger quickly first. Thinking about Ares, Kong Tae, and Keldian, he wondered what they would have done. Now that he thought about it, he remembered that there was a guy who had mentioned something. Once, when Hansu was drinking with the guy had inquired if Hansu had ever heard of hidden dungeons. But Hansu had returned the question, asking about hidden dungeons. The guy explained to Hansu that hidden within the tutorial area was a dungeon of the highest difficulty. He admitted he hadn't been able to clear it, and in fact, nobody had. Hearing this, Hansu inquired if the guy had only cleared the middle part but still managed to become strong. The guy replied with a hint of pride, affirming that was correct. His presence there as a member of Valkyrie served as proof of that. He also told Hansu that if he could go back to the past, he would definitely try to clear that dungeon first. If he had, he probably could have beaten Hansu. He added more context, stating that one thing was certain: the harder the difficulty, and the more impossible it seemed, the bigger the reward when someone succeeded. He also questioned Hansu if he wasn't curious about what was at the end. Reflecting on this flashback, Hansu decided on his goal. But to achieve it, there were things he must take care of first. In the first stage of the tutorial, the early stage where 100 people gather and act together. After that, a person acts within the allotted area for 1 week at a time, and can do this hunt for 3 months. After completing the second stage of the tutorial, the safe zone would be released, and it would be possible to contact the people who arrived previously. However, there were currently 2 hidden pieces in the first stage of the tutorial, and nobody had ever reached the end. Hansu knew he must obtain them. That was the only way to get stronger quickly. But first and foremost, he needed to obtain the closest first hidden piece. As he was about to go look for it, Hansu heard someone ask with annoyance, "What is he trying to do?" Some men in suits were irritating a girl by holding her hand and asking her what she meant, insisting that they were just asking her to come with them. The girl, clearly annoyed, replied that they were going on their own. Hansu tried to avoid the situation because conflicts were starting to arise everywhere. But the men, harboring evil intentions, argued that they must work together to survive. The girl struggled to free her hands from them as they kept insisting on the necessity for everyone to live. However, in Hansu's mind, he didn't have time to pay attention to these things. He needed to find the hidden piece since it would disappear in a week. Just as he was in a hurry, he heard someone call him. "Come, Hansu." Hansu turned and saw men of the same age as him and inquired if they knew him. This shocked them greatly. Then, a blonde-haired man came forward and casually asked Hansu, "Hey, come Hansu! Is he crazy?" They were all together just before arriving here. "What is he saying?" Hansu made a face, pondering how this man knew his name. Then he remembered that they were his college classmates. They had come on a trip here together, they all died, so he had forgotten. The girl freed her hand and announced that they were going to go with Hansu. The girl was also his classmate named Yumihi. Hansu thought that her looks would definitely invite trouble. The acting leader among the men in suits questioned his men if those were punks looking down on them, targeting Hansu as the one who had dealt with the pack of goblins earlier. The acting leader, observing his men, thought that if they attacked Hansu now, when he was tired, it could be advantageous. The acting leader stepped forward, drawing their attention by shouting, "Hey!" and insisted that they should listen to people until they were done talking. He provocatively asked about Hansu. Who is that guy? He looks pretty hurt. Will he be able to do anything looking like that? He then threateningly suggested that Yumihi should come to them while he was still speaking nicely. The more, the merrier, he said, implying that she should come to them before they approached her. Hansu simply told his classmates that there were always some people of this type around. Then, stepping towards the acting leader of the bad guys, he remarked about getting overexcited over his first fight, not knowing who his opponent was, while under the illusion that he could beat that person. As Hansu got closer, the acting leader became a bit scared. Hansu placed his arm on the acting leader's shoulder, asking, "Does he understand what I'm trying to get at?" Hansu bumped him a little when passing by. The acting leader showed some rage, but Hansu, displaying his new blade, asked him if he had anything to say. A large figure with a distinct appearance, possibly the boss, arrived and told everyone to calm down. He addressed Hansu, telling him that they were not bad people. He asked Hansu if they would go with them, noting that, given the situation, there seemed to be a lot to do. Then, in a heavy voice, he inquired if it would be better to act together. Hansu, looking into the boss's eyes, thought that this guy had already adjusted perfectly to this place. Furthermore, he had no reason to hide his true nature anymore and was running wild like a hyena in the wild. In the end, he would become an outlaw. Hansu contemplated whether he should take care of him now. Then he pondered over the advice of Keldian and Ares. Keldian had told him that there was no reason to kill needlessly, but not to show mercy to the cockroaches who would bring harm during the Great War. Ares, on the other hand, had requested him not to push people away so much and to do his best to take care of them. Thinking of Ares saving so many lives, Hansu set his mind that he didn't have time to take care of all these guys right now. These types of guys would self-destruct when left alone. Hansu then said to them, "Whatever. Just go away." The man who was acting as the leader was extremely irritated by this. But the boss told him to let it go. Then, addressing the acting leader by his name, Sungo, the boss mentioned that this little punk, referring to Hansu, wasn't important. Their goals should be to focus on establishing order in this place, a weird place with weird monsters and that infuriating fairy. He liked the idea that the strong ruled here, so they should seize this opportunity. The boss then ordered his men to move on, and both Suit Guys and the Hansa's group departed from the area. Hansa's classmate, the guy with blonde hair, wondered why humans seemed scarier than goblins. He then pondered about Hansu, recognizing that he had always been a strange guy but questioning if he had always been like this. He remembered Hansu as a parentless individual who always sat dazed in the corner, so he hadn't thought much of him. Then, he directly asked Hansu why he acted like he didn't know them. Hansu, making a thoughtful face, replied that it was due to memory loss. Hearing this, the blonde-haired guy expressed amazement and asked, "What? Is he being serious?" Both making faces, the blonde-haired guy then mockingly inquired why Hansu was talking like that and acting like an old man. Hansu responded by asking if it was that obvious. Hearing their conversation, Yumihi, the girl they had encountered earlier, laughed heartily. Hansu, observing her smile, wondered what was up with her. He thought it was a pity, she should have lived a comfortable life. But in this world, beauty was a double-edged blade. If utilized well, it could become a powerful weapon, and he was sure they would do fine. After walking for a long time, a girl among them inquired if they had a destination in mind, noting that they had been walking silently since earlier. Yumihi also questioned Hansu about their current destination. Hansu responded that she would understand once she saw it. Finally, they arrived at their first destination, the subway station where the hidden piece was located, the Gangnam Station. At the entrance of Gangnam Station, Yumihi inquired of Hansu about their reason for being there. Hansu, thinking he couldn't bother explaining every detail, recalled Ares' words, which had altered his solitary plans. Consequently, he simply informed Mihi about his intuition, which somewhat surprised her. Hansu then proposed the idea of having gained a superpower instead of regaining his memory, astonishing everyone. From his viewpoint, considering the existence of fairies, superpowers didn't seem implausible. Meanwhile, two classmates quietly debated whether it was wise to continue following Hansu. Responding directly, Hansu affirmed that their participation was optional, respecting individual choices and suggesting they could observe from a distance if preferred. This stance annoyed Taesung, the blonde-haired classmate, who disliked Hansu's demeanor. Despite these mixed feelings, most began descending the station stairs with a sense of unease. Taesung, feeling uneasy, questioned Hansu about their safety and the eeriness of their location. Hansu, responding negatively, mentioned meeting friends already in the area. Taesung, with arrogance, questioned the likelihood of someone residing in such a place and whether Hansu knew them personally. First to reach the platform stairs was Taesung. Hansu cautioned him to halt, noticing something amiss. Abruptly, Hansu drew his knife, leaving everyone baffled by his actions. Taesung, sensing danger, turned to find Hansu apparently attacking him. The look in Hansu's eyes signaled Taesung to evade. Shocked by the knife, Taesung narrowly avoided it, only to realize the knife had sliced through a hazardous insect near his feet. Hansu then explained that they were in a dungeon modeled after Gangnam Station, infested with green worms that emerge in response to ground vibrations and despise sunlight, hence their usual subterranean hiding. Slicing one of these worms, Hansu retrieved a rune it dropped. As he picked up the rune, he cautioned them about the worm's dangerous mouths, capable of tearing flesh easily, leading to swift incapacitation and death upon a bite. This revelation frightened everyone, prompting Hansu to demonstrate a simple method to counter these green worms. He advised that stabbing directly into the worm's gaping mouth would effectively kill it. Understanding Hansu's guidance, everyone began to eliminate the worms as they emerged from the ground, except for one individual who struggled with the task. Observing their efforts, Hansu deemed 4 of them useful, but noted one person's lack of confidence. He advised this person to walk on intact marble slabs, to stab the blade into any cracks showing bare ground, and to be cautious of his hands. To the others, it seemed like a game of whack-a-mole, aiming for spots where dirt was disturbed. However, the individual who found it difficult to hunt worms became increasingly disheartened, feeling the pressure to participate. Suddenly, a worm burst from the ground behind him. Paralyzed with fear, he was unable to react. Hansu swiftly intervened, pushing the frightened guy aside and slicing the worm into 3 pieces. The fearful individual attempted to express gratitude, but Hansu, believing it unnecessary to comment further on his non-participation, ignored him. Hansu thought that further involvement from him would only be burdensome. Feeling disheartened, the fearful individual remained silent. Taesung then addressed Hansu, noting his apparent foresight and questioning how he knew what would happen. Hansu reiterated that it was due to his supposed superpower. Though agreeing, the group paused, deciding to focus solely on hunting the worms, which they did with significant success. Observing that they weren't collecting the runes dropped by the worms, Hansu inquired why they were neglecting to pick them up. Yumihi, speaking for the group, suggested that they preferred Hansu to collect the runes, likening it to entrusting resources to a carrier in a game for protection. She reasoned that merely collecting runes wouldn't instantly empower them like Superman, so it seemed more practical to let Hansu have them in exchange for protection. Hansu, exhaling deeply, disagreed, insisting that they should claim what they hunt. He emphasized that if they intended to accompany him, adhering to basic rules was expected. He explained that in the Abyss, long-standing rules of coexistence established I take what I hunt as a principle. During group hunts, distribution was based on contribution and priority. He warned that in life-threatening situations, reliance on goodwill was fragile. His words left the group confused, but Hansu was certain they would soon grasp the harsh reality of their situation. He advised them to rely on their abilities, cautioning that uselessness led to abandonment. While Yumehi seemed to understand and accept this rule, the others were less enthusiastic at first. However, they soon began to collect runes independently. As they adapted, Hansu predicted they would eventually fight fiercely over rune possession. Amidst their newfound activity, Taesung excitedly announced his discovery of a unique rune, the essence of the Akrul troll tribe. He instinctively felt that possessing it could grant him a superpower. But Taesung, looking at Hansu with crooked eyes, thought that earlier Hansu had nonchalantly said they should distribute the items. Taesung suspected that Hansu was going to put him in a pinch if he started fussing now. So, Taesung asked Hansu if he could keep the items since he was the one who found it. He also asked Hansu if he wouldn't go back on his word later. Taesung found it unexpectedly easy when Hansu assured him by nodding his head. Hansu, thinking about the Akrul troll tribe's essence, considered it a decent rune for early in the game. This skill brings defense and regeneration power, both of which are necessary for survival, making it quite popular. Moreover, it's more of a passive rune. It does increase appetite, but as for the food, he planned to just steal it after becoming stronger. The strength and proficiency of a skill are determined by its rank. Smart ones with plenty of magic usually have around a few hundreds of them. Kelbian himself acquired over 1,000 skills. However, Hansu was different. Back in the past, when he tried to pick up the rune stone, he just couldn't hold it in his hands, it pricked his hands. Ares thought that, as for Hansa's allowed count of skills, 7 was the limit. If they had known this before, he could have learned a stronger skill. Being restricted to only 7 was a fatal flaw for Hansu. But he had a great strength unparalleled to this weakness. The skills he possessed included Endless Evolution, essence of the Dororo lizard which only added to the fast regeneration and later on became strong enough to rival Kang Tae's immortal arts, and Ganglian's Rapid Rush, which came up to the level of Kelbian's signature move, Space Tear. Ares gave him the nickname 7 Stars after his unique trait. This was the trait that allowed him to stand side by side with them, as he caught up to them despite falling behind by a whole 20 years. The defining trait that made him come back here on their behalf. So, in the end, he must not make any mistakes. As Ares said, he needs to be careful while selecting the 7 skills to learn. If it goes according to plan, it'll be a smooth ride before they leave the tutorial zone. Taesung decided to learn the Troll Tribe rune he found earlier. After learning, 2 windows appeared indicating that the physical resistance stat had been created. He also acquired a skill, Essence of the Akrul Troll Tribe, with 1% proficiency. After finishing learning it, he opened his state window by touching his ear. In his state window, a physical resistance stat was added, and his other stats increased significantly. Taesung thought Hansu was foolish, believing that if he were in Hansa's position, he would have never given it up. He was confident that he would catch up to Hansu in no time. Hansu then suggested that they should proceed. Taesung placed his hand on Hansa's shoulder, indicating that it was going to be dangerous ahead, so they should stick together. He also remarked, while looking at Yumehi, that it was better for the stronger individuals to lead the protection at the front. Yumehi was puzzled as to why he was looking at her while saying that. With Taesung's hand on his shoulder, Hansu considered the possibility that Taesung saw him as a rival. However, Hansu found this notion rather endearing, though he did not plan to let it go unaddressed. Then, they started to descend further. Yumehi asked Hansu why they were heading downward. Hansu replied that they were going to ride the subway. When she further inquired if any trains were still operational, Hansu simply told her she would see in time. Hansu had suggested riding the subway because he knew of someone whose information was consistently reliable. While discussing hidden dungeons over drinks, a bystander criticized the knowledge of Hansu's conversational partner, claiming it paled in comparison to his own. Irritated by the interruption, the person Hansu was originally speaking with questioned who was butting in. The interjector accused him of flaunting his essentially non-existent knowledge. Then, Pushing aside the person Hansu was drinking with, the interjector sat next to Hansu, promising to reveal the fastest way to gain strength. He advised Hansu that securing a crucial item in the tutorial zone was essential, and it could be found in the subway. The subway stations, while differently located and structured, maintained a uniformity up to the third floor. He directed Hansu to a portal at the center of the stairs, leading all the way down to a subway that hadn't yet departed. Boarding this subway was tantamount to success, despite the difficulty of reaching it. The subway was set to leave after a day, making it a critical opportunity Hansu needed to seize at any cost, eager to discover what lay within. Upon arriving in front of a portal, Yumehi observed the unfamiliar entrance, and thought it didn't resemble any part of Gangnam Station she knew. Despite her numerous visits to Gangnam Station, she had never encountered an entrance like this one. Yumehi queried Hansu about his willingness to venture inside, given the unknowns within. Hansu reassured her, stating he was acting on instinct and reiterated that anyone hesitant to proceed could leave at any moment. Taesung immediately voiced his decision to go in, followed by Yumehi's agreement to do the same. Hansu, observing Mihi, speculated that she was becoming anxious, likely because she had earlier assessed the situation and understood the increased risk to someone like her. He realized she acknowledged the necessity of strengthening herself, even if it entailed facing physical harm. However, two individuals opted to remain behind, preferring to continue hunting in the current area. Sang-jin, identified as the most fearful, expressed his intention to enter as well. Taesung challenged him, questioning his courage and intent given his previous hesitations. Sang-jin retorted that his decisions were of no concern to Taesung, prompting Taesung to angrily accuse him of exploiting the situation without facing the risks. Taesung was prepared to further berate Sang-jin, but Hansu intervened, urging an end to the feudal dispute and emphasizing the urgency of their mission. He encouraged them to proceed with their individual choices, prompting Mihi and Sang-jin to follow him. Taesung, feeling slighted, believed he was being mocked in front of Mihi. Upon their entry through the portal, Hansu contemplated the tutorial zone's diversity, with its myriad creatures and varied terrain, expecting some uniform aspects among them. Indeed, they were met with an unexpected sight, a convenience store, confirming Hansu's belief in the zone's unpredictability. Sang-jin and Mihi were astonished to discover such a mundane establishment amidst their extraordinary circumstances. Everyone entered the convenience store, searching for necessary items. Hansu thought, as the informant had mentioned, that there was always a convenience store on the second floor of the subway, considering it some kind of reward. Taesung, seeing some knives, wondered if he should take different types of weapons. The informant had also informed him that it was more like a supermarket than a convenience store, yet it really had everything he needed. Watching Hansu taking a pot, Mihi inquired what he was doing. Setting the pot on a stove, Hansu replied to Mihi that he was going to cook. Then, Hansu took out a big bag. Mihi noticed that the bag was full of green worm's blood, then Hansu poured it into the pot. When Hansu was collecting blood from green worms, Mihi had been wondering what he was doing back then. Hansu took the goblin skins and added them into the green worm's blood because goblin skins become highly poisonous when in contact with green blood. Goblins evolved to survive against green worms, and their venom is extremely potent. A great smell emanated from it, so Taesung thought of it as food and requested Hansu to give him just one bite. When Hansu informed him that it was poison, Taesung immediately moved away, like 100 hands away, and told Hansu that he should have mentioned it was poison first. Hansu responded arrogantly to Taesung that he was the one who approached upon smelling it. Then, Mihi inquired how Hansu knew how to make it, since they had never considered cooking that. Hansu simply responded that it was his superpower, and his brain was overflowing with knowledge. Taesung felt irritated by that response, as it was clear to them that he was avoiding the question. But in reality, Hansu felt as though his head would explode from memorizing all of this. Kelbian had told him that even if he returned to the past, without knowledge, everything is useless. It's the amount of information that matters. Because it's not just about obtaining the items but reinforcing them as well. Keldian warned him that he must not share this information with anyone and to bear in mind that future knowledge only hastens the decay of the abyss. Because he is not turning into Prometheus. And he should only unravel this knowledge as planned when he really needs it. The poison would be useless without knowing the exact ratio and boiling time. After completing the poison, he just pours it into a bottle, then applies it to his blade. Seeing this, Mihi inquired if they could use that too. When Hanso responded that sure they could, but they would need to give him half a strength or stamina rune per application. Taesung, shouting, told Hanso that he was being way too petty. Hanso simply responded to him that he could have just given it to him for free, but in the long run, that's probably not a great idea. Hanso believes that one-sided relationships tend to fall apart easily. After that, Mihi informed Hanso that she would give it to him later and requested to let her apply it first. Hanso, convinced, handed over the bottle to her and warned her to be careful because it would be very painful if it got on her hand. Taesung considered snatching it, but realized that if Hanso was cautious, he couldn't even snatch it from him. Then, Taesung and Sangjin also requested Hanso to allow them to use it first and promised to give the runes later. They began to apply it to their weapons, and Hanso moved aside to begin other preparations. He took a backpack with necessary items and 2 other handbags, which should be enough for his preparation. Turning back, Hanso noticed that they were also ready, but they had big backpacks. So, he asked them if they were trying to become bait for others with backpacks that big. He also mentioned that unless they wanted to spend their lives fighting, they should consider burying it like this. Besides, sweeping up everything like that would make other people chase them with their lives on the line. He suggested they leave some stuff behind. Observing Hanso, Mihi thought that at first, he was just quiet, but he was more than a fighter. She also wished to get a superpower like his. Then, she buried her stuff, reflecting on how hundreds of millions of people were missing up until yesterday, but not a single one of them came back. She determined that she had to survive here for the rest of her life and didn't want to die at any cost. To survive, she knew she had to do her part, and with Hanso around, she didn't need to worry too much. Seeing Hanso and Mihi together, Taesung felt jealousy, thinking that Hanso acted like he was all that. Then, Taesung threw his backpack to Sangjin and instructed him to take care of his backpack as well. Calling over to Hanso, Taesung inquired if they could also acquire the superpower Hanso mentioned. Hanso responded that probably they could as well. Hearing this, their mouths opened in amazement, and they excitedly asked, "Really?" The thought of possibly gaining superpowers made them visibly happy and smiling. Hanso recalled Keldian's words, stating that among the people who came to this world, several developed special powers that they didn't possess in reality. Keldian also cautioned him to be careful, for among those who arrived, the diversity of special powers was great, and among them, the extremely dangerous ones stood out for their remarkable traits and bare survival compared to others, as they progressed. Keldian advised that if someone was not of any use, it was best to get rid of them. Remembering these words, Hanso considered the idea of getting rid of those like Taesung. Taesung, puzzled by Hanso's demeanor, approached Hanso and commented on his rudeness, questioning if Hanso was still upset about Taesung's earlier anger towards him. Hanso paused for a moment before replying that it was not something he was accustomed to because there wasn't much to talk about. In the last 5 years before Hanso returned here, fighting against species from the abyss that kept surging in, hope gradually turned into despair, and that despair dulled everything. Lost in these thoughts, Hanso appeared distant. Taesung struggled to understand why Hanso was acting so aloof. Taesung speculated whether Hanso had injured his head in a fight, feeling irritated by his own situation. He lamented that if it weren't for the allure of that superpower, he wouldn't have had to embarrass himself or be subordinate to Hanso. Taesung then devised a plan, resolving to wait until he became stronger. He fantasized about starting to date Mihi and then being able to dismiss Sang Jin and even boss Hanso around. However, their plans were abruptly interrupted when Hanso shouted, ordering everyone to wait. Hanso had spotted slime on the ground. After analyzing the type of slime, he concluded that it did not belong to a sword snail since it lacked the distinctive sour odor. Additionally, the absence of half-dried guts indicated it was not from a slashed-up zombie either. Hanso deduced that there was only one possibility left. They were in the land of mermaids. These are definitely traces of a land mermaid. These mermaids aren't quick, but if they are hit by the paralyzing venom, it wouldn't be hard for the mermaids to sever their limbs. But Hanso has a plan. Seeing Hanso thinking again on his own, Taesung told him to stop acting like a know-it-all all alone again. However, Hanso requested them to follow him, promising they would be surprised by this. Hanso also told them to come and help him. But the three of them have no idea what Hanso means. Earlier, Hanso made the firebomb as his preparation. As they don't have gasoline, this should be enough. Mihi asked Hanso if these firebombs were from the convenience store earlier. Taesung wondered how convenient for Hanso if this is a superpower too. Taesung asked Hanso if he preferred this place to their original world, implying he can do whatever he wants, and if he had the power to do that. But in Hanso's mind, Keldon was telling him to just kill him and at the same time telling him no, he can't. Seeing Hanso making a face like that, Taesung asked him if he had said something wrong, why he was looking at him like that. Then Hanso exhales a breath and requests them to listen carefully. He will tell them the plan now. The plan is, when one person throws the firebomb, the other three will come forward and attack. And the one at the front line will have priority to receive the runes. Then Taesung said that he would take the lead, questioning that someone competent should be protecting the front line. Hanso asked Sang Jin and Mihi if anyone would throw the firebomb. Both raised their hand. Then Hanso asked them to come to an agreement on who's going to throw it. Seeing Sang Jin ashamed to argue with Mihi, Hanso decided to let both take turns. Then they started to walk, Sang Jin questioning himself how far they were going. He couldn't even say that he wanted to back out at this point. He came because he didn't want to be left behind, but were the rest of them okay with this? Sang Jin and Mihi both were shivering for fear. Then Hanso declared to be alert. Here the mermaids are coming. The mermaid was making weird noises, prompting Hanso to order Mihi to throw a bottle at the source of the noise. Mihi took a firebomb from her bag and, praying that she shouldn't be weak and could do this, lit up the firebomb and threw it towards the mermaids. Then the firebomb fell in front of the mermaid and instantly set it on fire, burning it down. Mihi became excited as she succeeded. Hanso rushed towards the mermaids, told Taesung that the rest of them would attack now, and cautioned him to be careful not to let the paralyzing venom that they spit touch him. Observing Hanso killing the mermaids, Taesung thought that Hanso was taking all the runes for himself again, and he couldn't keep losing to him. Then a mermaid, seeing Taesung off guard, jumped towards him. He, terrified and stirred his knife innately, thinking he almost missed, somehow managed to take it down. He felt relief that the poison knife worked really well. Then Hanso noted that the venom he gave was worth the runes. Taesung thought, with this poison knife, he could catch up with Hanso at any time. Then, everyone working together simultaneously, Mihi and Sang Jin threw firebombs from the back, and Hanso and Taesung killed the mermaids from the front line. Easily slicing the mermaids, Hanso thought it was just as he expected. In a fight against flammable paralyzing venom, bringing the firebombs was an excellent choice. The blades had already gotten dull, but it didn't matter since this was what he had prepared for the venom. Taesung also found it easy to kill the mermaids. Noticing the runes falling on the ground, he thought these all belonged to him, letting his guard down and going to pick them up. Suddenly, a mermaid spit out its paralyzing venom at Taesung, hitting his leg, and he fell. Taesung didn't grasp the situation he was in. Rather, he thought this was humiliating because everyone was watching. But as multiple mermaids approached him, fortunately, they were not quick. However, Taesung panicked and shouted for the creatures to get away from him, seeking help, but unfortunately, Mihi was all out of firebombs. So, she proposed Sang-jin switch with her. With this sudden request, Sang-jin panicked and couldn't light up the firebombs. A mermaid came so close to him that Sang-jin got so scared he dropped the firebomb from his hand. Taesung got angry and shouted at Sang-jin, telling him to throw the firebomb, not mess things up. Sang-jin resigned to his fate. At that time, Hanso stepped in and sliced the mermaid apart. He told them to calm down and just follow the plan, assuring them there wouldn't be any problems. He also told Sang-jin to take a break and pick up his runes. Taesung exhaled a deep breath, thinking he was dead, but thanks to his skill, he had already healed. Hanso also told him that if he improves his stamina and rests, he will recover faster, then told him to come and take his runes. Looking at the runes he received, Taesung thought about Hanso, considering him calculative for being so strict in dividing them. As everyone was taking their runes, a devilish idea came to Taesung's mind about taking Sang-jin's runes as well. Then he approached Sang-jin, calling him by his full name, Choi Sang-jin, and asked him if it was a Choi family tradition to lack conscience. Sang-jin tried to ask what he meant, but before finishing, Taesung held his throat so tightly that Sang-jin couldn't even breathe. Taesung, while gripping Sang-jin's throat, angrily remarked that Sang-jin was incompetent for his failure to properly throw a firebomb, reminding him that Taesung himself could have perished because of Sang-jin's error just moments before. Sang-jin, gasping for air, attempted to explain, starting with, "It was because of..." But before he could fully articulate his thoughts, Mihi shouted, demanding that Taesung immediately release his hold. She expressed her fear that Sang-jin might die if the situation persisted. After the confrontation, Taesung forcefully pushed Sang-jin away, warning him to be more observant and make wiser decisions in the future. He further demeaned Sang-jin by grabbing his hair and reminding him of his previous submissive state, insinuating that Sang-jin had forgotten his social standing and advising him to live a life of conformity like his father, without causing trouble. As Taesung was about to take Sang-jin's runes as well, Hansu intervened by throwing his knife in front of Taesung, which surprised Taesung, prompting him to curse in astonishment. Then Hansu informed Taesung that what he was claiming was not rightfully his. In disbelief, Taesung questioned Hansu's decision to allocate runes to Sang-jin, criticizing it as wasteful and questioning Sang-jin's contributions. He suggested that they, excluding Sang-jin, could equally share the runes, implying they would manage perfectly well without him and seeking confirmation of his viewpoint. Taesung's frustration was evident in his expression. In response, Hansu emphasized the importance of equitable distribution, stating that it was wrong to interfere with another's means of survival. Showing his displeasure, Taesung dismissed the notion of fairness as nonsensical and cautioned Hansu against potential regrets. Then Hansu suggested to Sang-jin that he should better watch over his share by himself. Unable to say anything, Sang-jin collected his runes. Yumihi approached Hansu, asking if he was annoyed because of them. She added that with the situation as it was, she just figured that seeing fights must be frustrating for him. However, Hansu replied that this was good enough for him. He was not going to complain about something they were bad at. Trying to clarify, Mihi asked Hansu if that meant he was going to move around with them until the end, feeling like Hansu acted as if he would leave any moment. But Hansu answered that it was up to them to follow him. They were all doing pretty well, so there was no need to worry. Walking through the area littered with dead mermaids, Hansu thought that mostly stamina and strength runes were dropped. He surmised that the organism's characteristics could not be ignored after all. It wasn't a bad outcome, considering that both stamina and strength were important at the moment. These attributes just happened to be the stats he needed. Just one more rune was required to unlock an achievement. After acquiring it, a little fairy appeared and informed Hansu that the sum of his stamina and strength stats had surpassed 50. A system notification appeared, indicating that the first achievement was accomplished. The fairy congratulated him on being the traveler. Seeing this, Hansu smiled slightly. Then, the fairy inquired if Hansu was the traveler who had raised his hand the other time, expressing curiosity about who was advancing so quickly. She speculated that her judgment wasn't wrong, as they always appreciated individuals who made an effort. Laying on Hansu's head, the fairy mentioned she would like to give a small gift to the most active traveler. From afar, Mihi, shivering with fear, questioned if it wasn't unfair that they had different stats to begin with. The fairy responded to her, assuring that she didn't need to be that afraid because once they started, they shouldn't touch each other. Then, addressing Mihi, it was conveyed that their decision not to harm her was not based on personal dislike. Approaching Mihi closely, the fairy whispered in her ear to scare her, suggesting that there could be exceptions and she might be one too. The fairy laughed heartily, watching Mihi become frightened, and told her that, of course, he was only joking. He never got tired of doing this. Then, the fairy inquired of Mihi, questioning if she found the situation unfair, and told her that she should know better. Pointing out to her, the fairy continued that Mihi possessed an unmatched superior aspect compared to others and hadn't discarded it just to be on par with everyone else. The fairy advised that life has always been unfair. Then, returning to Hansu, she mentioned that she had wasted time talking about pointless matters. Now it was time for Hansu to receive his reward. The prize for surpassing a certain number in a combination of stats was 3 runes of his choice. The fairy bombarded him with questions about which rune he wanted, questioning whether he desired dexterity or perhaps sense, and what about a healing rune. She elaborated on the healing rune, mentioning that it was expendable, could heal a hole in his stomach, and most poisons. It was essentially akin to having an extra life, but Hansu was aware that it was futile if a limb was torn off. The 3 of them considered the healing rune, recognizing that it meant anyone could survive danger at least once. Hansu then mentioned, by any chance, reflecting their shared thought that if things went awry, he might use at least one for himself or another. However, Hansu inquired if there was a rune that provided immunity to magic. After thinking for a moment, the fairy confirmed that such a rune existed. The 3 felt disappointed, thinking Hansu did not care much after all. But Hansu understood that while healing runes were valuable, magic and physical immunity were rare in the tutorial, except for special cases like Kangte. Increasing stamina only affected the speed of his activities and recovery, while physical and magic resistance offered more fundamental defense or immunity. He could compensate for physical attacks with experience to some extent, but magic attacks were a different matter. Now, with this level of magic immunity added to his stats, it should be sufficient to prevent immediate death. The fairy then told Hansu that, having fulfilled her role, she would be departing. Lastly, she added that she was counting on him, urging him to do well, handsome Appa. Upon realizing the fairy was female, Hansu and the others were taken aback. Hansu then suggested they should get moving, but the 3 of them couldn't stop laughing after the fairy's remark, prompting Hansu to ask about their expressions. They brushed it off, saying it was nothing. Then, on the 3rd floor, they continued hunting the mermaids. Mihi noticed it seemed easier than before. Observing Hansu collecting something from the mermaid corpses, she thought he was making something again, possibly poison. Noticing that Hansu's movements appeared the same as earlier, Mihi, driven by curiosity, asked why his speed remained unchanged despite having acquired so many runes. Hansu, acknowledging her keen observation, showed his hand, explaining that it was because of this. Mihi inquired further, so Hansu demonstrated that she could collect runes in a similar manner by thinking about the rune collection. Mihi attempted to try it, but Hansu advised against copying him because, firstly, it slowed down the hunt, limiting the number of runes he could keep. Secondly, the runes were meaningless if he died since all collected runes would drop upon death. Sangjin then asked why he was collecting them, to which Hansu replied that it was so he could trade them later. He explained that while it might be difficult at the moment, once some rules were established, they could be used as a substitute for money in the tutorial zone. He advised them not to do this and to pick them up one by one instead. Taesung became angry, accusing Hansu of looking down on them for listening to him. Hansu sighed deeply, thinking that they didn't understand their situation and would come to realize it once they faced criticism from others. But before that, they were in for an overhaul. He requested their full attention, stating that whether they chose to follow him or collect runes, he wasn't concerned. What he needed at that moment was for them to listen to him. Hansu then instructed them to hand over all their weapons to him. After hearing that, Taesung questioned Hansu on his actions, asking why Hansu was behaving like a robber and questioning why he would demand them to surrender their weapons when he already possessed his own. Hansu, after dropping his weapon, responded that he couldn't fight with it. He explained that the blades were too rough and therefore useless to him, adding that he too needed extra blades. When Hansu then inquired if Taesung understood, Taesung became infuriated, labeling Hansu as ridiculous and questioned, "Does he think I'd understand?" Taesung further inquired about what they would use to fight if Hansu took everything, emphasizing that they would also need to engage in battle. He then sarcastically asked Hansu what he expected them to do, stand idly with their thumbs in their mouths behind him. Sangjin then expressed his willingness to relinquish his weapon, but Taesung sharply rebuked him, demanding, "He should be silent." Hansu paused momentarily before questioning Taesung if he was willing to confront the adversary below. Without hesitation, Taesung agreed, arrogantly asserting there was nothing to fear. He admitted to Hansu his disdain for the disdainful look Hansu often had in his eyes. Hansu, disregarding Taesung's remarks, thought he had anticipated Taesung's refusal, but reconsidered given the uncertainty of what lay below. This, Hansu declared, was his limit. Hansu offered them two choices. First, he would withdraw, leaving them to proceed independently. Second, they would refrain from involvement and observe his solitary effort to resolve the situation. He then inquired about their decision. Sangjin opted to abstain from participation, and Mihi concurred, suggesting that Hansu's depiction of the scenario implied significant danger. Taesung attempted to persuade Mihi, emphasizing the importance of mutual support in perilous times. He sarcastically accused Hansu of intending to abandon his allies to monopolize all rewards, questioning Mihi and Sangjin about their acquiescence to such a plan. In his thoughts, Taesung was indifferent to Sangjin's decision but concerned about Mihi's withdrawal, recognizing it as a dilemma for him. Upon hearing this, Hansu pondered the significance of friendship, acknowledging his past connections with them but considering it fortunate that Kelbian had not returned, as he would likely be navigating the indigo or purple zones by this time. Hansu realized the urgency of his mission and declared the conversation concluded, suggesting further contemplation on their ability to contribute to the conflict. Taesung internally acknowledged progress, regretting not reaching this juncture sooner. He speculated that Hansu's solitary venture indicated knowledge of valuable items below, deeming any hesitation to seize such an opportunity foolish. As the dreadful noises intensified from downstairs, the trio hastened their ascent, voicing their alarm. Mihi proclaimed her earlier caution, stating the danger was real. Taesung, overwhelmed, cursed their predicament. However, their escape was halted by an unexpected sight. A colossal viper snake, seemingly from another dimension, blocked their path. Amidst their attempted retreat, Taesung was incredulous at the thought of confronting it solo, questioning Hansu's sanity in facing such a beast. Hansu and the gigantic snake were locked in a standoff, exchanging glares. As the snake unleashed a deafening roar, Hansu prepared for the imminent clash. Anticipating the snake's attack, he positioned himself strategically behind a pillar, shielding his ears from the snake's potent shockwave attack. The wave, absorbed by the pillar, confirmed Hansu's expectations, his magic resistance mitigating its impact. The snake's abilities, reliant on magic and tough scales impenetrable by ordinary weapons, posed a unique challenge. Noticing Hansu unscathed, the snake lashed out with its tail, but Hansu, agilely sidestepping, retaliated with a dagger throw. Aware of the beast's vulnerability, he targeted the space between its formidable scales. The successful strike elicited a piercing scream from the creature, indicating inflicted damage. Regaining his stance, Hansu braced for the snake's next move. The snake, undeterred by its previous failures, screamed and lunged at Hansu with its mouth in another attempt to bite him, which Hansu skillfully evaded. In an effort to intimidate, the snake then enlarged its presence, attempting to scare Hansu. It launched another powerful shock wave, and although Hansu tried to protect himself by covering his ears, he sustained some damage this time. Without giving Hansu a chance to recover, the snake struck with its tail from the side, sending him flying a considerable distance. Hansu, now likening his situation to facing a formidable adversary, was bleeding from his head, an indication that the snake was reacting to his initial attack. The blade lodged between the snake's scales caused significant bleeding, highlighting the severity of the encounter. Despite the tutorial zone's supposed safety, Hansu's high physical resistance could not safeguard him against poison. Hansu, determined, stood with 5 blades remaining. Before parting, Taesung had provided these blades, suspecting a single blade might not suffice. Hansu, eager to engage the snake again, advanced, aiming to exploit the situation before the effects of his attack fully manifested. Meanwhile, Mihi, alarmed by the distant sounds of battle, hesitated, pondering Hansu's solitude and well-being. Taesung urged her to continue their retreat to the convenience store due to their lack of weapons. Yet Mihi, overwhelmed with concern, decided she must return to Hansu's side. Despite Taesung's protests and his frustration at being overlooked since their arrival, Mihi dashed back, followed reluctantly by Taesung and Sangjin. Upon their return downstairs, Mihi called out to Hansu, inquiring about his condition. They were met with a harrowing sight. Hansu, ensnared by the snake, bitten on the hand, and bleeding profusely, found himself in a dire predicament from which escape seemed improbable. Witnessing Hansu's plight, Mihi cried out his name,